I'm never upset for the reason I think. A beautiful flower, a nuclear explosion, a headline in the newspaper about a disgraced politician. All of these things are effects. They are not the cause behind manifest reality in the physical realm. They're just effects of the mind. And only the mind is in need of healing. Well, the physical illusions of the world seem extremely real. The psychological story of the world and its negative impact seems extremely real. The trauma that you or I may be experiencing in the aftermath of an abusive experience seems very, very real. But the thought system that creates that agenda is designed to trap you in a story that is bereft of hope, that is defined by disease and pain and a whole myriad universe of different vested interests. And at the heart of wisdom is the profound question is, what's informing my thought system? And when you're very, very humble, and usually I think for most of us that kind of humility doesn't come upon us just we're born that way, you know. The arrogance of ignorance is that we think we know what we know to be true because our senses and our world around us report it to us. And so we buy into the story without questioning what is the source of our upset thoughts, what is the source of our anger, what is the source of our sorrow. And if you look at the life of Ramana Maharshi, you know, there are stories there where he sort of played this loving father, like, well, why did you do that? That's not very loving, is it? Because that's the story you have to play when you're living in a dream where people are asleep and believe the dream to be real. But that was just his way of being appropriately adjusted to the fear in the minds of others that around him came to him for spiritual sustenance. But most of the time he was just very quiet, because the truth is not something that other people can reveal to you, although people would go to him. And the same is true of Krishnamurti. People would sit in a lecture, because when the mind becomes very, very, very well trained in the discipline of listening only for truth and love, it starts to gain a lot of powers. And, you know, Krishnamurti and Ramana, people would come to be in their presence, and their minds would just go quiet, because all minds are joined. And so the path that we take in undoing fear in the mind has stages of elevation and evolution. And what is inevitable is that this quiet mind starts to gather momentum. And the ego is like, you know, if you think of two schoolboys that have a fight and then they're brought before the principal, and one's like, he did this, no, he did this, blame, 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 you know. And then the principal has to try and calm it down and find out who started the fight or whatever. And that story is repeated a million times, where there's insecurity. And trusting in life, like where life is with a capital L, where life is not bound to the opposites, but just trusting that you might be a complete failure in the world, or you might be a great success. And the ego can use those stories to support its argument that there is nothing beyond its agenda. And it does. Look at me, I'm so successful, I'm so important. Or look at me, I'm homeless, look how bitter I am, look how desperate I am. And both are basically the same mirage. They're just two different sides of the same coin. That you're a victim of the world you see, because if you're a great success in the world and something goes wrong or you get upset, like even the most brilliant billionaire, they're unlikely to be enlightened because they're so attached to their value in the world. And my valueless thoughts are creating a valueless world, right? So only by investing in a thought system that goes beyond loss and gain can I start to look beyond the identity that traps me. And that process is immensely challenging. If your mother's just died, or someone just stabbed your father, or someone just stole your money from your bank, and someone comes up and says, you're never upset for the reason you think, do you think you're going to find any sense of compassion in that person? Well, of course not. But the Course in Miracles is not about teaching that teaching. It's about you taking that teaching and saying, well, is that true or false? And if it's true, my whole thought system needs to be rethought, needs to be reevaluated. And then it's promising that peace lies in the process of getting through that reevaluation. And what you begin to find as you take this insane idea, which is not insane at all, is that over the course of time and experience and practice, the still mind, the peaceful mind that doesn't project its hate and its fear and its threats and its feeling of being threatened onto others, is immensely liberating. It's the end of being trapped and ensnared. And that liberation is so, I can only speak for myself, but I think it's a very, very, very challenging path. There has to be some otherworldly determination in you not to see yourself a victim of the world you see the more you live on the planet. And I don't mean like walking around in a chronic depression. I mean like anything that goes wrong, like anything that you perceive as going wrong, giving you an argument to be frustrated or upset or lacking in peace. Now, I've had quite a few physical challenges in the last couple of years, and I think on a certain level, when people say, oh, when you just develop gratitude, everything gets better, and when the cloud of self-pity is so heavy around your head, and all the arguments your ego has to justify your pain and the clinging to your pain mechanism, gratitude is the last thing you can get angry at people saying, well, I'm so grateful, and just that's jealousy and fear. But what you begin to develop is this sort of compass for, well, what's talking in me? Where's that coming from? And you have that same compass, that same barometer for other people that are talking. And the last thing you want to do is try and fix other people, which is a great temptation again of the ego. because the only person's perception you have to correct is yours. And that doesn't change the horrific atrocities that go on in the world. But you begin to see, well, that's a cry for help. That's someone who's not in their right mind. And it becomes very simple, but mastering that simplicity is anything but simple, I think. I mean, it's simple in principle, but it takes enormous devotion. And in India, they call it Advaita Vedanta, right? They call this path of only seeing that which is wholly good, and seeing in the blemishes of the pain of the world a cry from the pained soul of man to remember himself